I'm Scott with Buff Production. I'm here working on a John Deere Gator, and if any of you all have owned one of these things and you're trying to add some accessories to it, you'll know very quickly that it only has a 15 amp at idle alternator on it, or charging circuit. So I had a customer bring this in to me. I added rear light bar, front light bar, fog lights, of course a winch, just going over my custom switches. That's for the fog lights, the rear bar light, the front large bar. I have a two-way winch in and out. I have a 5-volt USB charger. And this little guy right here, battery isolator. The dual battery is a must if you're going to be running a winch. Before the winch, I mean, I had some of these lights on the normal battery with no issues, but per John Deere, like I said, if you're sitting at idle, you do not want to be running lights. The Gator just, like I said, puts out 15 amps if you're idling. Now, that's just enough to get the Gator running. Now, if you're driving down a trail and you've got it ramped up on the RPMs, it'll put out about 30 amps, and that would be strong enough to run just about any light on this machine. But it's when you stop and idle, that's where you're going to kill your battery, even with these lights, because this light bar here, I measured that at 5 amps. Just that one light. This one was, the one in the back is about around 2 amps. The fog lights are about 3 amps. None of those are going to kill it if you're moving down the trail, but I would definitely not recommend running those lights if you're sitting still. You risk overcurrent the charging circuit, and you're going to kill your battery. You're going to be stranded in the woods. But there's no problem running down the trail with any of these lights on. You're producing 30 amps moving, and if you're in the higher RPM, you may create 35 amps. So, but definitely winch. I mean, I would never recommend running a winch without this dual battery setup. This customer brought this Gator in for a reason, and that was it. He tried to use the winch. Especially if you're using a winch, you're going to be setting still at idle. That's 15 amps. That winch is going to be pulling really hard amps. And then he barely got home because his battery was just at near point where his Gator wouldn't run anymore. So definitely this isolator setup with the dual batteries, and that is a stock part from John Deere. All my circuits to the switches are on relays to protect the switches from the current. The dual battery, and then we have the isolator. So basically, this thing, all this does is you run your accessories off the secondary battery, and this thing right here, if it drops below a certain voltage, it will pretty much cut this battery off and only run your accessories with it, and this battery will continue to run the Gator. So if you do decide to use the winch out in the woods, it doesn't drain your battery and you get stranded. That's seems to be what happens with these Gators if you add any accessories to it. Per John Deere, even a light bar, the primary circuit only has enough to keep the Gator running if it's idling. That's why the headlights if you set still for a certain period of time, the high beam headlights will kick off. They're trying to conserve your battery life so you don't get stranded out in the woods. So this dual battery, I think it's 12.7 volts. If the batteries if the primary battery gets lower than 12.7, then what will happen is the isolator will separate that secondary battery, and then your accessories will continue to run on that second battery, but it will not allow the primary battery to go down any lower. So that will, yeah, your winch or whatever, your lights will stop working when it gets down way too low, but you will still be able to get home because the primary battery will still have a charge. So I went a little bit step farther. I went ahead and added 2 little voltage gauges here. This one's going to be the primary, and then that one's the secondary, and I'm going to show you how the isolator works. So let's get this thing started up. I'm just going to kick the thing on right now, and notice I have all the gauges. Just the single LEDs will light up when you turn the Gator on, and you notice the 2 gauges. This is going to be the primary battery, and you notice how it's reading 2 different voltages. The isolator button, what that does, and I'm going to demonstrate that here in just a second. When you push this, if this little battery lights up, I've got this wired to the isolator where when you push this battery, if it's on, what it does is links the 2 batteries together. It's called a boost switch. So what that basically does is it connects the 2 batteries as one. So in case you have trouble starting the Gator, if it doesn't have enough power, that gauge will just link the 2 batteries together for a specific amount of time. Now, it calls for a momentary switch, but I've actually made a toggle switch because I want to be able to leave it on if I want to. If you make it a momentary, the second you trip this thing, it'll isolate, or it will connect the 2 batteries together for about, I've added up to about 2 minutes. That gives you just enough time to start the Gator and go. You definitely don't want to link the 2 batteries when you're using the winch or using a lot of lights, because that is the whole purpose of the isolator, to isolate the battery. And if you push this button and you link the 2 batteries together as one, then you would be no better than having just the regular battery in there. But there is use for this switch, because if you do have trouble starting the Gator, this will allow you to get more battery to the starter by pushing it. So I will demonstrate that in just a second, and we'll watch this. The primary gauge is 1220, and the secondary battery is setting at 1263. It's just because I've been playing around with it, starting it and stopping it, and it's gotten the primary battery a little weak there. So we're going to flip the switch. Now this should, you see the battery light comes on right here. Now this battery light is basically telling you that the batteries are linked. And you notice if I turn it off, the battery light stays on, and it will do that for about 2 minutes just to give you time to start the Gator. And that is basically the primary function of that battery isolator button, is just to be able to get the Gator started. Now you notice your 2 gauges here, they're getting really close to each other. It's 1232 now and 1241. Now the whole purpose of the button is to link the 2 batteries together as one, just to give you some more charging power to start the Gator. Now the isolator button is going to hold the batteries together for about 2 minutes just to get the batteries, or the Gator started. And you notice when this battery light goes off, these batteries will unlink in the normal state. So this, watch what happens when the battery light goes out. We'll give it another 20 or 30 seconds here. But these batteries will go back to isolated, where, there you go. Now this battery is going to go back up. This battery is going to fall back down. Now this customer definitely requested, I did the first setup with only these light switches over here, but he definitely wanted the winch setup because on his old switch, he couldn't tell if it was in or out. So this thing's pretty neat. I can wire this several different ways, but I wanted it lit up all the time on this particular gauge. I wanted this one lit up just so you can see them in the dark. He requested green. And the battery isolator, it works a little different from all the other switches. Most of the switches, they'll stay green if you turn them on. But just like the buck switch, he wanted a buck there because he's a deer hunter, and this light actually lights up the bed of the Gator. That's where he puts his bucks at. So the pod lights, that's simply the fog lights up there. Now I left this switch right here stock for a reason. This thing has an auto thing in. It's got a timer in it where if you turn this on and you turn your high beams on, and remember me telling you that the charging circuit's only 15 amps at idle. If this machine is idle more than like a minute or two, this is automatically going to kick off your high beams and go straight to low beams. And that's almost like telling me that John Deere knows the charging circuit on this thing is terrible from the factory. So that's almost like it's proof because they don't want you running the high beams when you're idling because there's just not enough power to keep the Gator going. I tried to get the wires in there as factory as I could. That is my winch wiring. I ran it up through the floorboard where the stock harness is. Everything is ran with the stock harness. I will say this floorboard is a real pain in the butt to open. It's really hard to deal with, but I wanted it as factory as I could get it. This is a factory kit, and the isolator, this is all these are is grounds. That's for your LED status light when the batteries are linked, and you've got to ground the isolator. And I will note that I've read online where these things are overheating. Now, I will say this little piece right here that John Deere had on this factory harness was wired wrong. They had the ground going to the LED line. So I just went ahead and cut this off. Now I don't know why, if that's the reason why those guys in the forums are burning these isolators and they're getting really hot. I don't know if they're properly grounded, because from the factory, this connector was connected wrong. And that was straight from John Deere. Just my experience, I looked at the wiring diagram and I noticed it. They had the black wire of the isolator the black wire of the isolator was going to the LED wire, and that is definitely wrong. You want the black wire of this isolator going to ground, and then the white wire goes to your status light, and then the purple wire goes to the switch itself. This customer loves his. He just wants it to work the way it's supposed to work. He wants a winch where he can get out of stuff. He's a hunter. He's all the time back in the backwoods. He doesn't want to get stranded out in the woods, and he just wants it fixed. And I just feel like John Deere dropped the ball on the charging circuit. And like I said, there's not a lot of information online about these things. I had to figure out everything on my own just by using wiring diagrams. Like I said, if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments. I'll get them answered for you, and I will give you feedback when this customer uses all of his electronics now. You guys have a good one, and hit the subscribe button and hit the like button for more information. Thank you.